Hey, I'm Amanda something and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm drinking some coconut water with a splash of aloe juice for my morning beverage in addition to all of the water and the herbs that I had earlier. Hopefully my hair doesn't mess with my mic. I'm still learning all of this, guys. Today I actually wanted to talk about something that I read from Dr. Greger's How Not to Diet book. So I want to preface this with the fact that I am not a doctor, not a dietitian, not a nutritionist, not any of those things. I also don't want to downplay anything because, frankly, a lot of the best advice that I've gotten in my life has not come from individuals who are any of those things. So I'm not saying ignore them. They are great if you break your arm or something, but I am saying use your critical thinking skills whenever you're being given really advice on anything. Ask yourself if that person has any of the things that you're looking for in that area of their life. And if they don't, I probably wouldn't take their advice on it. So a lot of what I talk about is stuff that I have read from sources that I trust, and or stuff that I have experienced personally, so I feel confident enough talking about it. That said, there are so many different unique situations that can come up and so many different moving parts when it comes to your overall lifestyle and every little detail of that can affect your health as it varies day to day and hour to hour. We don't feel the same every day. I mean, I think that if your health is pretty good, you can have a pretty consistently good day every day, but there are going to be little variances. Sometimes you just sleep better and sometimes you just don't sleep quite as good. Quite as good. So yeah, these things happen, especially I think if you're trying to function in modern society. Sometimes it feels like having one leg on either side of a river and just, it's hard. Trying to grow our own food, but living in a rental, but also, living in the States and still being surrounded by that modern lifestyle, which has, I'm not poo-pooing it, it has some benefits. But there are a lot of things that I experience with that lifestyle that don't work so great for me. I'm already pretty type A. I don't need anybody else trying to tell me that everything has to get done all the time. But I digress. Anyways, so I think that the really special scenarios happen when both science and experience intersect and they seem to support each other. I think a lot of times, in my own opinion, if what I experience is somehow different than what the science is saying, we have to remember that science is still evolving. So perhaps it just really hasn't studied that thing from the right angle yet to really fully understand it. And you can look up, Dr. T. Colin Campbell talks about this a lot. He's talked about it in the Cornell courses that I've taken, the plant-based nutrition certification that I have, and the sustainability certification that I'm still working on. But he has a book out called Whole as well, and I think that talks about it as well. But he talks a lot about a holistic approach to science and data as opposed to a reductionist approach to science and data. And I think most recently he's acknowledged that there are benefits to both. There is value in both. There really is. But to do only a reductionist style of research without anybody trying to stand back and look at the bigger picture is always going to be a fail. That's his belief, but it's also mine. I completely agree with it. So let's use our critical thinking caps, okay? So today, the part in his book that I really loved was a section about all of the sugar in fruit. And you guys will have to tell me in the future when I do videos like this, if you want me to sort of read the section. It might take This part might be like a 5 to 6 minute read, so I don't know if you want to hear everything in its entirety and its flow and then discuss, or if you want me to pull out little pieces. I'm going to assume that you'd rather me pull out little pieces for purposes of this video. So as I'm sure most of you know, there's a big debate about sugar in general in Western society. A lot of people, I have a lot of friends who do things like keto diets and have cut out fruit to varying degrees on low carb diets, and they think that that is their best strategy. And they think that there's a lot of research to support it. And I really have to question that research. From my own experience, I don't think it works. I just don't. But also, I feel that there's a lot of research saying that that strategy is wrong. So someone in that position, I think, really needs to look at both sides of the coin and then look at their lives and question, is this keto or low carb type lifestyle leading me to be on a cycle where I have lost a bunch of weight? Perhaps I did it very rapidly. Maybe it was very impressive, but was I able to maintain it completely at the 5-year mark or the 10-year mark? How many of those times did I go up and down a few times? How sustainable is it for you? How sustainable is it for the environment? Can we please factor that in? Because if you don't have a healthy environment to live in, then you're not, it doesn't matter how healthy you are. So anyways, I will read some excerpts from that, from this section though. So one question that he's talking about when it comes to sugar is whether it's just the dose. And he talks about the average sugar intake of Americans, and that you'd have to eat about 6.5 cups of apple slices a day or nearly 8 cups of watermelon to eat the amount of refined sugar that the average American is eating per day. To me, that actually sounds like not that much because I eat a ton of fruit, as you guys know. But he immediately acknowledges that even if you did, you wouldn't have the same effect that refined sugar would have. Fruit is even described as beneficial in any amount. So then they start talking about, or Dr. Greger starts talking about the actual studies that have proven that. So 17 people were made to eat 20 servings of fruit a day for up to 6 months. Despite their extraordinarily high fructose intakes, presumably the equivalent of drinking about 8 cans of soda a day, the investigators found that the subjects actually lost weight, their blood pressure improved, their insulin levels dropped. I want anyone concerned about diabetes to hear that. Their insulin levels dropped, and their cholesterol and triglycerides got better. This is the opposite of what people in Western society might expect based on all of these sensationalized headlines that they've read over and over again. So let's just sit with that for a second. That is 20 servings of fruit a day. I'll have to go through Chronometer and try to do the math and see how many servings of fruit per day I actually get. But that sounds like maybe more than the was it 6 cups? 8 cups of watermelon. That sounds like quite a bit more than that. So that sounds like a really genuinely healthy, greatly improved amount compared to what the average American eats. And to have benefits quite literally across the board on their health, doing a dietary change or lifestyle change that doesn't just benefit one area of your life, but benefits everything, that's how you know you found something good. So they wanted to test this even more, and they tested having essentially sugar water compared with later adding blended berries. So if you have something like sugar water, and now keep in mind, this is the average American having something like sugar water, so they probably had a very high fat meal prior, or the night before, or, all day, every day, and they're eating plenty of meat, 3 times a day. And then they're drinking sugar water. And that sugar water doesn't have any micronutrients. It doesn't have, this is refined white table sugar. It doesn't have any fiber. It doesn't have any saving qualities to it. But in addition to that, you have to look at what they've eaten around it as well. I'm not sure, and this is something where science hasn't explored yet, if somebody took a fruitarian, for example, and gave them sugar water, what the effect would be. I'd be really curious to see that. Maybe it would still be bad, but maybe it wouldn't have any impact at all. It's a really good question. And we'll discuss some of that later. Honestly, this is kind of long. I might break this into 2 videos. So essentially, when these, average Americans drank the sugar water, though, not only did they get a very rapid insulin spike, it sort of overshot the amount of sugar that the body expected. The amount of sugar that the body expected to go into the bloodstream was more than what was actually there due to how rapidly it was happening. So once the insulin overshot, the body had to bring the insulin down as quickly as it could, which actually resulted in being hypoglycemic. And then part of the body's response to that, and the way that it does that, is to also dump fat into your bloodstream. So the fact that that's how they're saying the body handles that insulin spike, and also they say it has adverse effects such as increasing insulin resistance. That key detail of dumping fat into your bloodstream, the fat blocks the receptor sites for insulin. Your body's literally functioning the way it's supposed to. So the issue really there is the fat in the bloodstream, right? So we need to keep that in mind. But however, they also tried a version where they added blended berries to the sugar water. Now, these aren't even whole berries necessarily, they're blended berries. So I think that there are levels, right? There's things like probably the sugar water, but then there's also varying types of fruit juice, right? Like the clear fruit juice versus the fruit juice that's been like cold pressed, and then there's also blended fruit, and then there's the whole fruit where you're chewing it. It's important to chew your smoothies, side note. I'm not particularly good at that, if I'm being honest, but I don't find myself craving smoothies as often as I used to. So once they added blended berries to the refined sugar, which added about one additional tablespoon of sugar actually, so the sugar content overall actually increased. They did not see the higher blood sugar spike, and there was also no hypoglycemic dip afterwards. So essentially the body did not overshoot the amount of sugar coming in. It did not overshoot the amount of insulin that was needed, and therefore it also didn't release a surge of fat into the bloodstream to try to block some of the insulin, because it was an adequate amount. It wasn't too much or too little. So initially they thought that it was actually the fiber or soluble fiber in the berries that was causing this effect. Now fiber is a great thing, but when they started researching that a little bit more, they discovered that there are actually polyphenols in fruit that can help block the transport of sugars through the intestinal lining. Now, I'm not saying you don't want to absorb the carbohydrates that you're eating, but this is just something that helps moderate absorption. So it slows absorption, and it gives your body the tools that it needs to help regulate how it's absorbing the sugar, the carbohydrates. So those are really important details. If you have a refined juice from the store that has no nutritional value left in it, then you will probably see similar issues. However, if you have, and they discuss this later as well, if you have something like a cloudy apple juice that has more polyphenols, then you won't see as much of an issue. So that's really interesting to me, because I think a lot of people assume that the fiber is the key detail, and fiber is really important. It's important for many reasons. It's important for digestive health. It's important for your gut microbiome. It's useful for blood sugar regulation, but it's not the only mechanism regulating your blood sugar, right? So think fresh, whole plant foods with antioxidants, vitamins, minerals, polyphenols, so many different chemicals in those foods that are naturally occurring that we haven't even identified yet. So then they also did some research evaluating whether it would be more effective to tell people to eat more fruits and vegetables, so a positive message with more fruits and vegetables, versus what they considered negative message, which was eat less fat, eat less processed foods. So they tested this on a group of overweight women, and it was over a period of 6 months. And both groups lost weight. So both groups saw a positive impact. However, actually the group that was told to eat less fat and less processed foods saw even more weight loss than the group told to eat more fruits and vegetables. Now, all of that said, we want to do both, right? But I think that, again, that speaks to the power of eating a whole food plant-based diet, but also making sure that it is on the lower fat side. Even if we're eating a bunch of avocados, it's still a really high fat diet. And that's just not what our bodies were designed for. Eat your avocados, just, don't make it the baseline of your diet. So the last key detail that I thought was really interesting, and I think that this it reminded me of something Tomas and I have been talking about recently. Getting sweaty in here, if you guys remember the last video, it's Project Garage, and it's Florida, so it's very hot. So one of the things that they wondered about was how to get people to eat more fruits and vegetables in sort of a seamless way. And just by offering them for free in cafeteria settings, they saw people quintupled the likelihood of meeting their daily recommended intakes, which are still kind of low in my opinion to begin with, but offering free fruits and vegetables quintupled the likelihood that they met at least a minimum recommended amount. That's pretty amazing. And so I'm going to put this down now for a minute. This is a really awesome book. I highly recommend it. I think it's on Audible as well if you don't like to read. What Tomas and I were talking about the other day, especially with all of the gardening that we've been doing, we go for a lot of walks in our neighborhood. It's a really nice way to sort of relax and to break up the day and to move the body in sort of like a gentle way. There are trees everywhere in our neighborhood. It's beautiful. I'm very thankful for them. But really, we live in Florida. It is, as you're seeing, like a very tropical, I think it might technically be considered subtropical climate, but I mean, it's very warm here most of the year. We get plenty of rain. We're very lucky for all of those things. And I know that, I've planted mango trees, banana trees. We can grow a lot of tropical fruit here. We can grow a lot of things here. What if every single one of the trees that are currently pine trees and oak trees and, God forbid, like another freaking palm tree. Nobody needs another freaking palm tree. They just don't. All of these things, all of the grass on the lawns that we spend a lot of money and natural resources that are finite watering all of the time. What if instead of those, they just happen to be things like mango trees instead? What if they just happen to be things like banana trees instead? What if they just happen to be food instead? I mean, the nature, the plants, the wildlife, the trees, whether we planted them on purpose or they landed there on accident. We've got magnolia trees, which are absolutely beautiful. And don't get me wrong, biodiversity as a whole is important. But actually kind of what we see currently is a lack of biodiversity, because we see the same types of plants. I think they're called crotons or something, things like that, planted over and over again in every yard. There's not much variety and there's not much food. And it's weird to me. There are a lot of things that we could scavenge in theory. Lots of different types of weeds, for example, are actually edible and have a lot of nutritional benefits. Definitely don't do that without researching it. Don't just randomly eat things if you don't know what it is. So that's great, but we really do need, calories and fruit and carbohydrates as well. And if it were just growing on the side of the road, that's essentially like the free fruits and vegetables offered in these cafeterias. People would probably eat a lot more of them. And you wouldn't have to plan so far in advance all the time, because if you were out for a long walk and you happen to get hungry or a little parched or something, you could just reach up and grab a mango. It would be that easy. The interesting thing to me is that that's how we see everything in the States. And we live in kind of a suburban area right now as well. When I've lived in cities before, they've had a very similar issue though. I mean, everything's just like a bush or a palm tree, basically. Like nobody in the States needs another palm tree. Can we just get that clear? Nobody else needs another palm tree. I don't hate palm trees. They're beautiful, they're cute. But like, I have to get this rant out. Nobody needs another freaking palm tree. Not necessary. The counties spend so much money and the cities spend so much money planning things to make their place like beautiful in some way, with like so many freaking palm trees on every like median of every highway. It's ridiculous. When you're spending all of this money on the labor and purchasing the plants and then watering them, all of that, all of these resources, when you literally could have done the same thing but had it been food. It's kind of mind-blowing. So I feel like it's this fundamental element that is sort of not working for us. It's not supporting us when it could be in just our natural environment, or what used to be our natural environment, and sort of the infrastructure and just the way that we think as a culture. I do say as a culture because when I've been places like Costa Rica, which you guys know I absolutely love, you can walk down the street there and pick a mango from anybody's yard because there's so many freaking mangoes everywhere. You can walk down the street and just grab food as you need it. It's not, quite as much as maybe would be ideal. They could maybe do a little bit more, but I think that's because they don't even really consciously do it. They just let nature do her thing and kind of step out of the way. A little more, nobody's perfect. They do it a little more. I do see more things like litter there, but I think that might be more of a result of fewer cleanup efforts there, and it depends on the area that you're in as well. I think in the States, maybe in some areas we see less because there are more cleanup efforts. I still think people are jerks and littering everywhere. That's the thing. That's a different rant entirely. Today is Rant with Amanda, I guess. So yeah, basically that's the point, is that I think fundamentally it would be great to see, if all of these new subdivisions are going to be built, because that's always happening around here anyways, and I've seen things like about housing shortages happening in the States, and I know that's been going on in Orlando for quite a while. Everything's really overpriced here considering what it is. We've seen prices that are spiking up close to what I've seen in like New York City and Brooklyn and stuff. not quite as bad, but close. And we don't have things like the public transit or, benefits that they have. People still have to own things like cars here to be able to function and get around. So it's just, yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. So if we're going to have all of those issues, then why not make the new things that we are building more sustainable, more effective? Why not build into those development plans some food? I think that there is a little bit of a recognition of that and an awakening of that, and I feel like that would be highly marketable. My business brain looks at that and thinks like, hell yes, like why not? Why not market that? There's a lot of people who are still living the modern life, but they want to feel like they're a little bit more wild. And that's their ticket right there, buying a home in a place that has considered sustainability and has considered providing a food forest, essentially. So that's my message for today. I hope you guys are eating plenty of fruit. It's really good for you for a lot of reasons. Fruit sugar is not an issue, not even in the slightest. I genuinely worry. I don't know if any of my friends who are doing this are watching, but I genuinely worry about my friends who eat keto and low carb. I really do. I think that you can make it work. I absolutely do. I think that you can see perhaps faster results in a shorter period of time. I get the allure of it. But I think that they're setting themselves up for some really scary issues later on. And to be really blunt, I don't appreciate what they're doing to the environment that I share with them. So that's my message for today. I don't know how to close out this video, so just, go eat some fruit. Oh, my finger is untaped now, and yeah, it's doing a lot better. It's still pretty bruised, but I can straighten it pretty much now, so that's exciting. And I think the waves are going to be decent tomorrow. And I got a mount for my surfboard for a little GoPro knockoff thing. So maybe I can start getting some kind of like footage or something of that, just to add some, basically just some more fun stuff for you guys, because I don't want to just regurgitate things that you can read yourself all the time. I want to provide value in terms of, information that helps you, but also some fun, like some edutainment, basically. I don't want it to be just me yapping at a camera all the time, because that's probably kind of boring for both of us. So, cheers.